There's a contradiction running through law school admissions right now, and the conversation around the LSAT's been moving in one direction. They're talking about holistic admissions, test optional schools, the ABA dropping the LSAT requirement. So there's this idea that the LSAT matters less than it used to. But scholarship money tells a different story that actually things are moving in the opposite direction. Law schools are quietly writing six-figure scholarship checks to applicants who score high on the LSAT because the LSAT actually matters more. And there's this gap between what the narrative says and where the money goes that's going to decide whether you pay full sticker price for 3 years or walk into law school with zero debt. Now, a JD is four signals stacked together, so we got to start with what you're actually buying here. And when a big law firm hires a first-year associate at $225,000 a year, they are not buying a law degree, they're buying the entire wrapper with four separate signals bundled into that one JD credential. The first signal is that someone of a certain caliber admitted you. That is a filter. It is proof that a school chose you over the people they didn't choose. Inside that signal, the LSAT does most of the work. The second signal is the school itself. If it's a T14, if it's a regional power school or an unranked school, that is a market tier signal that employers calibrate against. The third signal is that you finished your degree. You were able to sit through 3 years of brutal coursework. You didn't quit, didn't fail out. You came out the other side. That is a proxy for your conscientiousness. And the fourth signal is where you finished in your class. What was your class rank? Did you graduate with honors? Did you have positions on prestigious legal journals? So that's a differentiation signal within your cohort. So that is the bundle. And right now, three of those four signals are unfortunately degrading every single year, but one of them is hardening. So in other words, the credential is collapsing into a single number, and most pre-laws have no idea it's happening. Now, I want to share with you the theory behind this, because there is this Nobel Prize in economics almost nobody outside the field has ever heard of. Michael Spence won it in 2001 for the signaling model. The idea that the value of a credential comes from what it signals, not from what is inside it. So the diploma is a stamp, and employers pay for that stamp. 20 years later, a professor named Brian Kaplan at George Mason ran the numbers. He looked at wage data and asked a simple question. If you go to college and you graduate, you make a certain salary, say $100,000. If you go to the same college, take 7 of the 8 semesters, and drop out 1 semester short of graduating, what do you make? If you got 7/8 of the education, you might think you should make 7/8 of the money, but the actual answer is close to half. So that wouldn't make sense if the value of college was the learning, because you got almost all the learning. So the value of the education is not the content of the degree. The degree is the stamp. Employers are paying for the certification that you passed through the admissions filter, and you also finished what you started. So economists call this the sheepskin effect, because old diplomas were printed on sheepskin. Now let's apply this to the JD. The JD credential is a stack of 4 signals, and each signal is a separate stamp. And each stamp only works if it differentiates between people. And what determines whether a signal differentiates is whether those who hold it look different from those who don't. Now, signal 3 is that you finished your degree, and that used to mean something because law schools used to fail people. They might give out C's, might give out D's. There was real attrition between 1L and 2L, but curves have softened because student evaluations punish professors who give hard grades, and donor relationships punish schools that produce angry alumni. And administrations are terrified of academic disputes and lawsuits, and so every incentive pushes grades up. This is why we have grade inflation right now. And so virtually everybody finishes their degrees, and so the signal of finishing is no longer a differentiator. The signal of how you finished your degree with class rank and honors and journals, that's also diminished because the gap between the top 10% and the median has also compressed quite a bit. It's easier to get honors now. It's easier to get into some sort of law review with more journals being out there, and more schools are moving to letter-only or pass-fail systems. So that signal is also weakening. Additionally, the school itself, and this one's a bit more complicated because, of course, the T14 still carries weight, but the median LSAT at top schools has climbed steadily for a decade. T14 schools that used to sit at 170 medians are now at 173, 174. And so the floor of what counts as a competitive law school has also risen. And so the school name signal is increasingly tied to the LSAT score that got you there. It is a downstream output of the first signal. And then there, of course, are all the other parts of the application: personal statements, resumes, rec letters, optional essays. All of that are in collapse right now for an obvious reason, which is that AI is writing them. ChatGPT could have polished half of the personal statements sitting in the admissions office this morning. Rec letters are basically templates now. Resumes are padded with fellowship sounding internships that nobody can really verify. And so the soft pieces of the application are losing their power to differentiate. But the LSAT score is not susceptible to any of that. It's hardening. It is becoming more predictive, not less, relative to the other components. And that's not because the LSAT has necessarily changed. It's not really gotten any harder, but it comes down to the rankings. Because the US News rankings weigh LSAT scores heavily. Heavily enough that it's really the single biggest input a school can move year over year. Bar passage takes time, employment outcomes take time, selectivity takes time, but the median LSAT can move with every single admissions decision. So every law school in the country has a permanent incentive structure pulling them toward high scores, because the alternative is to drop in the rankings, which means losing applications, losing tuition revenue, which would then mean budget cuts, losing faculty, which means dropping further in the rankings. And there is a certain cartel mechanic at play, because no single school can de-emphasize the LSAT without bleeding out. The ABA has technically removed the LSAT requirement, but law schools still use the LSAT because they find it useful as a predictor of first-year law school grades and bar passage rates. In contrast, the GRE doesn't really have the same predictive value, and it doesn't really help schools in the US News rankings in the same way. And so there's no real path out of this structure involving the LSAT that any single individual school can take. And so as the other three signals collapse, schools fall back harder on the one signal they can trust. The LSAT is the only part of the application where the same test, same scale, same conditions applies to every single applicant. AI can't write it for you. You can't hire a fancy consultant to take it for you. Your undergrad can't inflate it. You sit down, you take the test, you get a score. And I'm not saying it's perfect, of course. I know about the accommodations and the fact that it's easier to get extra time on the LSAT. And of course, there's the recent cheating scandal, but it's still the better than all the alternatives. So I'll say that. And so as the other components get fuzzier, get murkier, get shadier, the LSAT itself is getting sharper. And so you could watch this happening in the data right now. At the beginning of this application cycle, applicants started up 33% year over year. That was the biggest year over year jump LSAT recorded in over 2 decades. And of course, the increase has moderated as the cycle has gone on, but applications are still up significantly over the past 2 years. So that means more applicants flooding the system with more AI-generated slop essays, which means more noise. But with more people applying, you also have more high scorers applying as well in that 170 to 180 band. And so the pool of high scorers growing fast means you're going to have rising LSAT medians at the top 14 law schools. Right now, they range from 170 to 174 at schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, and so on. And so if you want to go to those top schools, the LSAT is the biggest credential you can bring to bear to get into better law schools, to get more scholarship money. And so if you'd like my help getting those better outcomes, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG.